Well, and I think we're uniformly bad judges of our own stuff. You know, it's like we hear like that little twinge in our voice that makes us sound like Don LaFontaine or whoever, and it's like, oh, I'm perfect. I just need to put more compression and put some more stuff on the front end of
more
it.
Compression,
more compression, more. Can I run it through like 3 286s before it gets into my system? It's like, yeah, you can do all that, but yeah,
yeah, just have a barf bucket right nearby.
Yeah.
I had a great time talking with Jim Edgar. He's got a wealth of experience. He's a great performer, and he's got a ton of knowledge about voiceover tech. And so, you know, what's not to like about somebody like that in our profession? A good guy to know. So to get to know a little bit more about him, check out my interview. Well, look, everybody, look who dropped in today. It's Jim Edgar. Hey there, Jim.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm doing well, Jan. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Now, Jim is located in Marin County, which is just a bippity-boppity-boo down the Highway 101 from me. What town are you in, Jim?
Technically San Rafael. I'm actually out in kind of an unincorporated area that most people don't know about in Marin. It's kind of one, there's like a few little enclaves that have kind of been outside of the Marinization of Marin. You know, after growing up here, and my wife and I, actually my wife's a native from the county, and we both tried to leave and cashed in all of our couch surfing tickets with all of our friends around the US, and by the time we looped all the way back to here, it's like we got to figure out how to stay here, so we doubled down and ended up back here.
Marin County is not a bad place to be. I spent my very first few years when I was born. Well, I guess my mom and dad moved to San Anselmo when I was just a little baby. And then when my folks split, we moved to San Rafael and lived in a great place there before moving up to the Napa Valley. And and so it's beautiful down there. And so good for you. And it's I didn't realize that you were a native of there too. So that's kind of
I'm not. I actually my parents, and I thank them for this profusely while growing up, moved out here when I was 9. My formative years were out here. My wife was actually born here. Her grandmother had her 6th birthday on the day of the San Francisco quake.
Wow.
And she was one of the later survivors of that. And,
man.
Yeah, so she's kind of been out here on the coast. We made our way here, and again, I thank my parents every time for getting us out of the Midwest. Like, thanks. Good job.
Where were you in the Midwest?
Well, we lived in Michigan. I was actually born in Delaware. I think I'm one of 2 people I know who were. It's a very small state. So there's not a lot of us. My dad had been in consulting and stuff like that. Was in kind of outside Detroit, and then got the opportunity to come out here to the Bay Area and kind of help an office out here. And
I see.
It was a big scary thing, but at that point in my life, I wasn't, I was getting beaten up by all the kids. I didn't really like my teachers, and so it was a nice chance to kind of start over out here.
It's like not being beaten up all the time would be a refreshing new start. So
it was it is the homes in California don't really have the neighborhood thing in a lot of cases.
That's true. Especially in Marin.
Well, it was at that time it was different too. It was it had a little different vibe back then, and
that's true.
Definitely, I kind of go around it now and don't really recognize parts of it, but there's enough of it once you get, if you know the trails to get out on and the places out in the West, it's a beautiful place.
Well, you're an avid bike rider too, and so I imagine you're all over the place. Are you?
I kind of actually voice acting kind of curtailed that slightly because I found that riding 12-hour loops and then trying to talk the next day were not necessarily mutually conducive to one another. So I used to be doing a lot of brevets and long single-day rides and things like that. And I was even stupid enough to race cyclocross for a while. And
really? Wow.
Yeah.
So very serious. Well, okay, so that's interesting about how it was influencing or ruining your voice acting opportunities.
It dropped my voice by about 1.5 octaves, so I had trouble matching stuff. So for about 48 hours,
you'd have to recover, right?
Like, I think I can match that.
It's perfect, Jim. Well, how did you get into voice acting? Have you always been interested in acting in general, or what? How did you get into this weird
Well,
business?
I think it was always kind of like hitting me with a cartoon hammer throughout my life, and I finally
Yeah.
paid attention. Uh, Growing up, my closest friends were really animated characters, and so they were very real to me at very young ages, and I kind of used to write what I called radio plays at the time, and
Yeah.
have characters talk to each other and kind of play the voices and
Yeah.
everything. But it was always very self-contained. I didn't ever do theater or do acting or anything in school.
Okay.
I kind of liked writing and creating all that stuff, and kind of most of it was in there.
Yeah.
And then also at the same time, I was doing a lot of messing around in recording studios, and kind of learning computer music and trying to get those things to all work with each
Oh,
other.
cool.
Set it all aside and went into retail for my adult career. I
Right.
worked in retail and marketing, and retail purchasing and all that stuff. And then about every year or so, I'd read this little article about this institute in the Bay Area that taught voice acting. And every time I read that, it was like, I got to do that. That just sounds so cool. I want to be a cartoon voice. I want to be able to be that voice that is on the radio,
Yeah.
or
Or that you
narrating a
grew up
show.
with. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then my wife kind of noticed that our dogs tended to sort of talk and to sing to one another a lot at home. So I think rather than have me committed, she gave me a weekend class to VoiceTrax down here in Sausalito.
VoiceTrax. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so I walked into this little 2-hour intro to voice acting class, and it was just like coming home. And it's
Yeah.
like,
The light
I
bulb
need
went
to do
off.
this. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it was so deep. It was like this resonant chord that just, it's like, this is what I need to do. And so kind of tried to figure out, invested in taking more courses and getting training, and
Right.
kind of followed that trail, and was lucky enough to do a little work within the first year or so, and then
Great.
kind of rolled that into getting signed with Stars, and which is a local
Stars
agency
Agency in
the Bay
San
Area.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then kind of just kept building up to the point where I could step away, and it was my day job.
Yep.
And so,
That is so cool. Yeah,
yeah, it was
absolutely.
nice.
Now, for those who don't know, I don't
Mhm.
know anybody who knows Jim that wouldn't know this, but you got somehow you got uh how do I say this? You became very knowledgeable about the tech side of recording and studio development, studio setup. How did you how did you take that deep dive? What caused you to take that deep dive into the tech side of it?
Well, I was a history major, and
Hmm.
I was undeclared, which is a highly marketable realm, with a Slavic
Yeah.
language and literature minor too. So pair that together. However, the reason I ended up there was because I was basically undeclared till about junior year of college,
Okay.
and I was taking all these classes, and just really trying to learn everything I could with the opportunity at that time. And one day I was poking around the music department, and this guy came out of a room, and in behind him was this wall of synthesizers and patch cords and recording gear.
Cool.
It's like, how do I do that? I want to do that, and
Yeah.
so kind of started taking those classes. At that time you had to sign up for labs. Usually it was
Right.
all night,
Yep.
and so just spent a lot of time messing with that stuff.
Yeah.
Again, mostly in kind of, I'd always kind of been like the guy showing up with a recorder for bands and things like that.
Okay.
So I'd always just done that. I mean, even back when I was playing with my radio plays, I was doing
Yeah.
that on a cassette player my dad had brought home from work, and figured out that if you let the batteries run down, you can pitch your voice up later, and if you lean on it, you can get like a really distorted kind of tone when you're talking.
Oh, how cool. That is so fun.
Well, I did burn out the first one, so I had to replace.
Can't imagine why.
Leaning on it, who knew? That was kind of not good for it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, kind of had spent all the hours, and then when I first graduated, I was thinking about getting a teaching credential, so I ended up at Sonoma State, and they had a really good electronic music and recording department. And so
I took classes there. I took
okay.
classes at Sonoma State, recording classes.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
was the Scully still there?
He was. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Kids today, they don't know about, getting the heads aligned and all that stuff.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. So spent a lot of hours in there, in the computer music lab next door, watching tape rewind and all that stuff. And then kind of didn't do anything with it. I had always been setting up like home MIDI studios and things like that to do. At the time, I was doing a lot more environmental stuff, kind of ambient stuff with recursive loops, kind of like Brian Eno music prayer
Cool.
reports and things like that.
Yeah.
And I loved that process, and I love that kind of creative texture.
Yeah.
But you know, that didn't really pay the bills, and so I
No.
kept kind of doing day jobs and doing other things, and just
Sure.
kind of stopped doing that for a while. Second, you know, the first full voiceover class I went into was like, oh, they're just using, you know, Adobe Audition and they're recording digitally. It all makes sense. And I think about the second class I was in, they lost the signal on the board, and so it was bus wrong. So I went over and pushed the bus button to bring it back in, and it was sort of like, oh, how did you know that?
You're a god.
So it's like, well, it was just bus wrong. And
what is it? Hold it, bus wrong. What does that even mean? That's an alien language.
It is. I'm here from the future to tell you about these things.
With your flux capacitor.
Well, yeah, we keep that out in the end. And so kind of had people start asking me, you know, privately, hey, can you come listen to this stuff at home? I'm trying to set up a studio. And so just, you know, kind of on a very low-key basis from the beginning was helping other voice actors as I was learning the craft of voice acting.
That's cool.
And then it just got to the point where I realized I was had this steady stream of clients for that, and actually
that's great.
I think I'd gotten like 3 emails that all started with, hey, somebody said I should just ask Jim, and somebody said I should just ask Jim. I was like, oh, I bet there's a URL in there. And so created kind of my other website, which is just for audio recording or audio consulting rather.
Right.
And that sort of, you know, has developed into this parallel business with my regular voiceover services.
That's great. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky. I mean, it's one of those things where you just sort of thought there was a class for it or everybody knew it, and then you realize that there wasn't, and people don't.
No, and a lot of people don't want to know it either. That's what I'm finding, is that a lot of actors, you know, they don't want to. Let me rephrase this. They want to know as little as they possibly have to. Just to get by. You know, please set it up for me so that I can hit record and maybe figure out how to create an MP3 rendering of that. And then that's it. That's all I want to know. So that's great.
Yeah, I try to kind of tease them a little further. I think too, most people start with that because it's just so overwhelming. You know, if you go into any Facebook group and ask any basic question, you know, you're going to get 50 responses, you know, some of which are extremely helpful, but most of which have a lot of words that don't make any sense. And so
thank you for all the words.
and so you know, part of it is just finding somebody that's not going to overwhelm you with everything. And that's sort of, you know, what I started doing actually back at VoiceTrax was they asked me to come back and teach some recording classes after I was working.
Oh, that's cool. Yes, that's right. You're on staff there now.
Yeah. I've been teaching down there for 6 years now.
Great.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so we all, you know, we start the first night with probably half the class, you know, almost doesn't even use computers that regularly.
Yeah.
And the idea that you can record into it and have something come out of it is a little bit scary. And so,
sure.
But as I like to say in the class, you know, recording is really a bunch of very simple steps in a chain. And so if we can kind of break it down to those steps and move forward that way, it's not quite so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And more importantly, when something fails at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night and you need to get stuff out the door Monday morning, you at least know kind of where to go look. And
yeah, exactly. So some at least rudimentary troubleshooting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, plus I think too, people have really been ingesting high quality audio for most of their lives. I mean, most of the stuff that we hear and see on television and you know, playing video games is actually fairly high quality to really high quality.
Yeah.
And so we kind of know when things aren't right. And part of what I do in the class is really give people terms to say, oh, okay, you know, is that really a rumble or is that more like a hum? Is it, you know, when it sounds kind of weird and muffled, you know, what's a cause for that?
Yeah.
So we kind of give them some tools and a way of doing some rudimentary troubleshooting which doesn't, which also doesn't equate to panicked calls at 11 o'clock at night
Yeah.
saying, I need to get this done.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. No, that's great. That's fantastic. Now, getting back to voice acting,
mhm.
what do you find yourself, of course, I think the classic motivation for many of us, I like you, was commercials for me, or not commercials, but
Mhm.
cartoons for me. Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
Mel Blanc, that whole thing.
Yeah. Mel's great. I'm a big fan of Dawes Butler for all sorts of reasons
Yeah,
too. So he was
absolutely.
definitely right in there as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But what are you finding yourself being cast for mostly these days? Do you have the opportunity to do some animation or character work, whether it's
Uh,
video games or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you may get the same thing. We get a little bit of the Bay Area mix, as I call it, which
Yeah,
is, we tend to get a lot of industrials. There's so much high
yeah,
tech down the peninsula and around here. That stuff just sort of falls in a lot. And I've done a number of those. We also have a very robust video game development culture here,
yeah,
and so a lot of games come out of this area, and then commercials as well. So it's kind of that mix
yeah.
there. A good part of my business is e-learning as well.
Hmm.
I started,
Yep.
that was actually the very first job I got, was that kind of lateraled from another voice actor.
Oh,
And
cool.
I've always kind of built that up and tried to market towards that to get clients coming from that. So
Yeah,
that's been a nice steady part of my business
kind of
almost
your bread and
since the
butter to a certain extent.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's good. It's a good, good steady workflow, and
yeah,
then the other stuff kind of comes in fits and starts.
yeah.
Because we're always hoping for like that big role.
That big national whatever it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, with the big paycheck. But
true.
yeah.
But
Okay. Well,
I'm also, again, from kind of my retail, meeting payroll history,
yeah.
I kind of like real steady, kind of strategic planning as well. So I've never really relied on just the big
No.
gig. I've
Yeah.
always figured that'd be gravy to anything I'm putting together.
Sure. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now, what would if there was a genre that you'd like to see more of come your way,
Mhm.
what would that be?
Uh, Everything.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I'm with you there. I mean,
yeah.
I enjoy it all, and but there are times when, of course, hey, a little more would always be nice. So
Yeah, no, and in all seriousness, I wish we saw a little more animation up here in the Bay Area.
true.
I'm also now represented by Tag out of Austin, and we see a
Great.
little of that, more of that coming up through here.
Good.
It's still pretty LA centric,
Yeah.
and I just haven't really tried to focus and crack that market.
Yeah.
Um,
But there is a pretty strong animation segment down in Austin or
mhm.
another area in Texas, isn't there?
Yeah,
Um,
Austin's kind of seems to be a hotbed. I'm not that geographically aware to know where in that area it is. It just seems like through that, since I got signed with them,
yeah.
I'm getting more opportunities there.
Good.
I'd love to do more animation.
Yeah.
Actually, I love to do games and toys. I've had some, have been some very weird characters and some very strange toys and games.
That's
Had a
great.
ongoing gig with Leapfrog over in Emeryville.
Oh yeah.
In the letter machine rescue team. I'm Quigley the robot, so who's very, very caffeinated and very upbeat. And those are always fun sessions.
I had an
Uh,
audition there once.
mhm.
That's as far as it went, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's great. Now, is there a highlight that you like to refer to or think back to or refer other people to? It's like, yeah, I did that. Isn't that cool? Whether it was, just a favorite job or character, or maybe it was a household name commercial that you did, anything like that.
Well, I think there's kind of three that I are my I don't know, so far the crown jewels, or at
Yeah.
least the
Okay.
ones that bring me the most warmth.
Yeah.
The first was getting a gig with a company that somebody had heard of.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is kind of always that like, oh, I know them. And so yeah, I did. I was there was a Samsung gig that I got, which had a really nice, beautifully shot video that I was really proud of,
Nice.
for one of their keynote speeches, a big event that they had a couple few years back.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, oh, somebody can recognize that, as opposed to let's say, less common names.
Sure.
The one that really, kind of made my day was I got a phone call from my mom once at about 7:45 in the morning, which is
Yeah.
never a good time to get a call from your parents.
True. That's true.
And my mom's on the phone going, I think I just heard you on the radio. It's like, oh, really? Where? How? And I had done the when the 49ers made the move to San Jose, I was the voice. They had this whole thing for the summer of the Talking Scoreboard, which was this animated
Oh,
character-y thing. So I had a whole series of things that were running on my mom's morning radio station in addition to other
cool.
places. And so I think that's the first time they realized that I might be able to be okay in this business
And understand what voiceover is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then the thing that I still think is it's kind of, it's not super high profile, but it really is something I enjoy, was I got authorized to be Stormtrooper for a Hallmark ornament.
Really?
And so, yeah, and which is much more complex than you would think, because Disney and LucasArts, Lucasfilm control that image. You have to be authorized to be a Stormtrooper before they let you on the gig. And so
Wow.
I had sent this audition in, and kind of didn't hear anything, and all of a sudden they say, okay, they've got to do a couple things, but you're in on this. And it's like, whoa, that's cool. So because I was authorized for that, that means that they can bring me in on other Stormtrooper voices.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Well, the coolest thing was finding the ornament at my local CVS and just playing it for 30 minutes until I got kicked out. It's like, that's my voice. That's my voice. That's my voice.
Yeah, sure it is, sir. Could you please leave?
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Please leave. You can have it if you just leave. But those were kind of fun. I mean, I feel absolutely blessed that I get to wake up in the morning and do this for a living.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are three good ones.
That's very cool. That's super cool. Well, to keep your voice going, you're doing it right now, and I've been doing it too. We're always talking about hydration and how important it is, and blah, and you can't drink milk and coffee, and don't eat ice cream, and don't eat fatty foods. It all gets a little crazy sometimes. Are you a strictly water guy, or do you allow yourself to drink things like coffee and have milk on your cereal or whatever it is? Or I mean, you're a pretty health conscious guy to begin with anyway. So, what do you do hydration wise to keep yourself in good shape?
Yeah, I literally can't drink enough water. I definitely start with that. Particularly, e-learning and long format stuff. If you don't start drinking an hour or so before you go in, you're going to die in about an hour. It's just going to not work anymore. I am, however, probably the last of the coffee achievers. And I don't know if you're quite old enough to remember the Coffee Achiever ads. Okay, so look them up on YouTube, kids.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I don't have a lot of vices left in life. So really strong coffee is one of them.
Yep.
I do like my tea too. I have a nice little resting afternoon moment, before I kind of
a cup
for the day.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I kind of like green tea. There's a couple that I really like. And then I've got a good friend who brings me back some excellent tea from the UK from time to time. So
sweet.
That stuff's you kind of be careful with that. We're not ready for that boost. But no, I don't. I wish I could say I don't do cheese and dairy and things like that, but my brother's a cheesemonger, so many times at our home when we've had family gatherings, the cheese course has sort of ruined us for the rest of the meal.
Oh yeah, I can. That is one. Cheese is almost. It can be like a vice for me. I mean, I've given up so much else, but cheese, no. Well, I don't eat it all the time, but man, when it's in front of me and it's a good one, hold me back.
Yes. Well, you gotta go with quality, whether it's a microphone or cheese or coffee or anything,
absolutely.
Or a fine guitar that you have sitting behind.
Indeed. Okay. Well, cool. Now this brings me to a question I've been kind of staring at ever since we've been on, and that is your booth back there.
Oh, okay.
Tell us
back there, yonder.
Yeah. Tell us about your home recording setup, and how obviously you've got an ISO booth, and did you start that way, or how did it develop into what it is now?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I used to record kind of dead center in the house using closing all the doors in the house, which were all weather stripped to isolate from the outside.
Yeah.
And I found that the quietest, best place to record was kind of in this central hallway that connected our kitchen to the rest of our house.
Okay.
And so when I was recording, you didn't have much mobility in the house, and
Oh,
also
right.
because we're in a kind of one of those post World War II boxes,
Yeah.
uh, anything that walks around the floor tends to make noise. And so our little 7 and, at that time 20-pound dog walking around would come up through the mic, so nobody could move when I was recording, which, in case you're wondering, can put some stress on your relationship.
Indeed.
So, but
Indeed,
I
because your spouse
recorded,
may not really understand what quiet means.
don't you understand? You cannot move.
Or breathe.
Excuse me.
Don't even
Yeah.
breathe.
Breathing's okay if you're breathing out the window, kind of like, yeah. But yeah, so that I worked out of the center of the house for about 2 years, in probably one of the ugliest looking setups you'll ever see. I had 4 inches of insulation against one wall because the refrigerator was on the other side of it. I had, foam and padding and draperies that would drag back along the side because I had to be able to break the thing down
Oh, right.
quickly and let us, actually walk around the house again.
Yeah.
And so I shared the pictures in my intro class, and with the warning that you never, or with the encouragement rather, that you never have to show your client where you record. And so
Right.
but the fact is that the sound that was coming out of it was really good. And it went
Good.
to air, it went on web videos, it went on,
Yeah.
all sorts of projects for about 2 years. Meanwhile, I was kind of focused on, I had all sorts of searches through eBay and through Craigslist. And I was just to the point where I had made up a bill of materials to go down to the local home improvement store and build my own booth, when all of
Okay.
a sudden one popped up. And this time, unlike, the previous year and a half, the guy actually responded to my emails. And so 4x4 vocal booth, guy lived in Modesto. He had only used it
Okay.
at home, non-smoking environment.
Good.
Uh, I will be there tomorrow at 9 o'clock,
Yeah.
and showed up and got this for about $1,200. And
Wow.
so,
That's
in
great.
case you're wondering, it just fits in a Ford Expedition. Not that I own one, but I borrowed one for the run.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
my wife and I went out there and squeezed this thing in, and
Wow.
yeah, it's been good. It's one of the early ones, so the door is kind of it's a lighter door than they
Is it a
have now.
whisper room?
It's a vocal booth.
Oh, vocal booth. Okay.
Yeah. And so, but the vocal booth, as again, kind of saying a lot of things I say in the class, anytime you get a booth, it really doesn't fix stuff as much as it just changes the equation.
Right.
So you are suddenly, after I had a fairly nice open space that was well padded, so it didn't have a lot of resonant frequencies.
Right.
Go into that, it's like, okay, this is going to sound great, and came out and just almost wanted to cry. It's
Yeah,
like,
I bet.
And so, yeah, so we had to kind of do a lot of tuning and
Yeah.
messing around with mic placement and things like that. 4x4 room, male voice, low frequencies, just love to boom. And so
it can
we
be
just spent a
trouble.
lot
Yeah.
of time. Yeah.
Did you have to add a lot of like bass traps, that kind of thing, additional absorbent material, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it ended up with just basically bass trapping, and I kind of built a custom one down into the lower corner, which seemed to be kind of a resonant place, because if you think about it, the booth itself is square,
Right.
but I talk into the corners, so that corner is sort of the place that reflections go to manifest.
Yeah.
And so kind of addressed a lot of the issues there, and then a couple of bass traps in key places, and that does it.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, so it's been nice. It's been a good, steady place to record. And
Fantastic.
the big benefit, I'm sure but for those who still are breaking things down, is all of a sudden the task of matching what you did last month, or particularly for e-learning and when things get rewritten, you can just jump in there and you don't have to worry that your sound has changed really dramatically.
Exactly.
So that's really the big benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking to that, do you find that you stick with one microphone for the most part, or do you swap them out depending upon what type of work you're doing? you know, that kind of thing. I mean, I've got a selection of mics, but frankly, I never use anything else other than this one.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of, I mean, and again, a little bit of this comes from my retail history of working as a buyer,
Yeah.
because I tend to be very cynical about new stuff and new gear, because there's always stuff coming out. And,
Sure.
you know, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it also really distracts from what we're trying to do.
Mm.
And so I think if you have a good mic and you know how it works, it's the same as having a guitar that you know how to play and you know what to expect from it. So
Yeah.
that it isn't just you get a great mic, you sound great on it. No matter what microphone you get, you're going to need to spend some time figuring out its nuances. That, you know, I got one mic and it took me, you know, a month or two to really understand how I could, you know, work with that instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first mic I used, I think cost me $99, and it was a knockoff from a company that isn't around anymore.
Okay.
But it was a really good, decent mic. And
Okay.
it sounded, you know, had a good capsule, it had good electronics, and the quality control was decent. So I just, you know, got in the habit of not really telling anybody what I was using.
Right.
Because I don't think there's really any upside for it. The people who care, you
They
know,
care
don't
about what it sounds like,
care
or the
about
people that matter just care what your audio sounds like.
exactly. And
Yeah.
otherwise you're in the argument over whether a U87 is better than a post-war, you know, 47 and all that stuff. But and you know, most of what we're delivering is just, you know, is flat audio. And
Yeah.
so, you know, raw files. And if it's sounding basically good, and if it's not overhyped in the upper frequencies, as a lot of the cheaper mics tend to like to do, or it's not booming in the bass, which, you know, is the habit everybody gets into when they get home and they start sounding, oh, I have a
I sound amazing.
I sound amazing. And they do that. It's like, and yes, I sound amazing. And so we kind of need to learn to use the instrument.
Yeah.
So now over the years, I have retired that original mic because it started I could hear noise and a little bit of distortion in the mid range. And it just, you know, it got to that point where it was not aging well.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of, and then I had one client who asked if I could get MKH 416 for them, and the answer is yes. And when would you like that delivered? And so they just have in their workflow, that's what they're matching to.
Yeah.
And so it just simplifies it for the client.
Sure.
And so I'll always respond to a client who is asking for that sort of, you know, product, you know, essentially a product from me.
That's right.
But I think that, you know, it's funny, you can take almost any mic and put it in that booth and it's still going to sound like that booth.
I see. Sure.
And so, you know, the space is such a huge component. And I know you and I are in violent agreement on this, because I've seen your posts as well in the various groups. But yeah, if you don't get the space right, putting a real expensive mic in there is just going to show every flaw in that
absolutely
space.
much worse than, you know, the opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, again, in the intro class, I play back, you know, I switch between 4 mics, and one of them is actually an iPhone mic from like an iPhone 4 too. It's really old and cheap, but they're all usable because they were all recorded in a good space.
That's right.
And so they kind of go, oh, okay, I don't need to spend $1,500 or $2,500 to get a certain mic.
Yeah.
If I damp my space and control that, all of a sudden, you know, I'm able to actually create, you know, some usable audio.
That's a great idea. What a great thought and addition to your class. It's a great example of what, you know, just what the space will do for you. You know, yeah.
Well, we do a lot of we focus a lot on listening, and that's sort of I don't tell them I'm doing that until like the second week, but we play back. I have a lot of examples, because I'm just a lot of times just trying to put names to what they're hearing.
Yeah.
You know, my wife's a visual artist, and so she, when I go draw with her, I did some painting classes with her, and you know, I'm slapping stuff on, and she's, you know, it's just about seeing. If you can see things more clearly, you'll paint better. And you know, that just frustrates all of us who can't draw.
Yeah.
But the same is true in audio. That if we start hearing and recognizing what the flaws are, rather than just saying it's bad,
right?
It's like, why is it bad? Well, I can't, you know, there's kind of a rumble. Oh, okay, that's different than an echo. That's different than some weird buzzy distortion or something like that.
Ear training is so important. And if you can put language to the sounds that you're hearing,
Exactly.
and communicate that, then you can really establish a partnership with somebody who's trying to help you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, or even a client, sometimes.
Yes.
Really, really important. Yeah. Cool. Now, how do you, speaking of your wife and going out and painting with her and that kind of
Mhm.
thing, what do you do? Are you able to break away from your studio and put thoughts of voiceover to rest for a while and go on a bike ride or work in your beautiful garden that I've seen? I'm getting hungry for some of those vegetables right now, Jim.
Mhm.
What do you? Is it difficult to break away, or you just kind of like constantly checking your email if you're not directly in your office at the moment? And how about weekends? Do you shut down during the weekends, or are you available? I know a lot of people, they do their best to stick to typical business hours, Monday through Friday. Are you one
Mm.
of those, or are you more open to working whenever your clients are saying, hey Jim, I need you?
I would say that it's very hard for me to avoid that last call. So if somebody asks me to get something done under a tight deadline or fast turnaround, or I have an audio client who, and it literally is on the phone to me crying, saying, I need to get this out the door and it's not working.
Yeah.
I'll absolutely listen to that.
Yeah.
I do try to maintain Monday to Friday. Part of it is uh, just making that decision that this is the time that I'm focused on work, because
Hmm.
I think, one of the things, from way back messing around in studios, we're biological organisms. We fail out over time. If we
Yeah.
don't stop and reset and
Right.
refocus and come back in, we're just going to spend more and more hours doing less and less quality work. And so
Absolutely.
one of the shifts that I had coming into voiceover, and it gets a little bit to the idea of long bike rides, is that I was always kind of an endurance based person. I could go do an 8-10 hour bike ride or a 6 hour bike ride
Yeah.
and throw hours at things. When I was working early in retail and trying to fix stores, 12-hour days and 7 days a week and stuff like that. And it doesn't work in the creative space, that we have to be anchored enough by recovery to be maximally creative. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
uh, I think over the years, I, I keep relearning that lesson that, I'm better off being sharply focused for a period of time and then totally disengaging and doing something else.
Yeah. Absolutely. I
Even
totally
something,
agree.
yeah, I was saying even something as simple as, working in the booth, I hear these people, it's like, oh, I was in there for 2 hours straight. It's like, yeah, I bet you sounded a little funny at the end of that.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of work in, it's sort of a modified Pomodoro method, if that makes sense to you.
I don't know that term. No.
Okay. Yeah. Basically a 25-minute chunk and a 5-minute recovery.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
they're all sort they're all, I mean, it's kind of comes from focus to, people figuring out how our brains work and how well we can maintain focus.
Right.
And so it is something that I absolutely chafed against when I first played with, because it's like, no, I just want to keep going. I want to keep
Yeah.
pushing, through. But at the end of the day, I would find if I did something like that where I focused and broke and focused and broke,
Hmm.
I would be much more energetic and be able to be invested in, my family and the other things and my dogs and my garden and everything like that.
Absolutely. And
Um,
also the work. I mean,
Absolutely.
as yeah, from
Yeah.
break to break. Yeah.
Yeah. You come back with, just that mental reset.
Hmm.
A lot of the times can make you go, oh, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did I
Absolutely.
do that on the first audition?
Yeah.
Kind of get a little bit of break and come back to something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, typically, getting back to e-learning and some of
Mhm.
the long form projects, you bet. I take a break probably every 20 minutes or so.
Mhm. Yeah.
Rehydrate, use the restroom, maybe go
Mhm.
for a quick walk.
Mhm.
If it's mealtime, if I'm hungry, and just come back to it refreshed. And
Yeah.
so, okay, for the next chunk, and then the next chunk, and yeah, absolutely. I totally can get on board with that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I do. And then I found that as my audio consulting business was kind of ramping up, I needed to kind of systematize some of that stuff. So
Mm.
created like I have an online calendar where people can reserve time. So I don't have to spend,
Oh,
4 emails going back and forth to say, oh, let's do 10 o'clock on Wednesday, because that works for both of us.
yeah.
And so that kind of, anytime I can kind of offload some of the simple tasks,
Right.
that helps a lot too, because I don't have to
use that.
spend mental effort to get it solved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
uh,
How about going away for, a long weekend or even longer, a week or
I
two?
remember when we used to do that. We used to be able to travel around the country.
We sure did.
Go see
Boy.
people.
Let me
For
look at my old
those of you
Polaroids.
watching this in 2028, there was this thing that we all had to put up with in that year 2020, which,
Do you take a recording rig with you?
well, the very first time I was working and had clients, I didn't. And the second day I got this, panicked text when we were up in Oregon saying, we just realized that we gave you the wrong paragraph and we need it and it's got to go next week and I need it like tomorrow. And so actually had to find a studio and finagle my way in there.
Yeah.
Since that time, I've usually traveled with stuff.
Yeah.
But I try, there are times where I've just said, I am not going to respond. You need to know this beforehand.
Yeah.
Right. The big secret for, the big secret for marketing on that though?
What?
As soon as you tell your clients you're going on vacation, it's like you just get this whole chunk of work.
You've invited the avalanche, as they say. Yeah.
Right.
That's great. Yeah. I usually say something similar. I say, hey, I'm going away for a while. I'm bringing a recording rig with me. It won't sound anything like my home studio, but so that's kind of the caveat. It's not going to sound the same, but hey, I'll do something for you if you really need it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Now, kind of piggybacking off of a question I asked earlier about kind of the cool things in your career so far that you like to think about and you can point to as being really cool. Have there been any particularly embarrassing moments, either in a directed session or maybe in front of a classroom, where you've just really stepped in it and it ended up being something you could laugh about later on and would be willing to share with us?
Not really. I don't embarrass that easily anymore.
Oh, okay, good.
And honestly, I like to laugh at myself frequently throughout the day. That's one of, I think I'm, unfortunately I generate a lot of humor. And so I'm always screwing things up and making mistakes and sort of, rolling with it. Cause that's sort of how we do this business. We take our best shot and we just go like, oh, that was stupid. Now I got to do this.
Yeah. Could I be worse? Yeah.
Exactly. I will say there was one time it was not embarrassing, but it was kind of like one of those moments where I wasn't sure I'd make it. And it really kind of put me off more than I thought it would. I had booked something, through my agent. It was going to be a nice gig. And it was, big expanse of coverage, high level client.
Yeah.
And I'm in a session and there's, 8 people patched in, just me and the engineer, actually in the studio.
Yeah.
And it was actually at Stars. They use that studio there from
Oh,
time to
sure.
time.
Yeah.
And so we kind of finished the first script and all of a sudden everybody drops off the line and it's like, engineer's like, did they say something? It's like, no. And about 5 minutes later, my agent comes around the corner and it's like, and it's like, you never want to hear that. It's like, what's up?
What's going on?
And what it turned out was that somebody in the session on the client side decided I sounded too much like their competitor's main voice.
Oh, come on.
Pulled the plug mid-session.
Oh.
Which at the time is like, okay, fine. I can deal with that. But what's weird is that it knocked me off for probably 2 or 3 months, and I didn't realize how much at the time. So it
kind of got in your head,
got in my head, and luckily, I had some good mentors and coaches with whom I talked that through.
Yeah.
And eventually kind of came back, but I didn't. It was kind of insidious because I didn't register at the time that it was a big problem. It's like, oh, cool, we'll get something else. But it's like, maybe that's my lot in voiceover life is to be sounding like the other guy. And so, it just kind of burned for a while.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Interesting. I had an experience that threw me, not for long though. I was able to shed it pretty quickly, but it was pretty early on in my career. I was lucky enough to get on the roster of a a company in San Francisco that did a lot of explainer type videos, and
Sure.
they always
Yeah.
wanted to record in their space. Unfortunately, they're not around any longer. But so I always had to make the trip into San Francisco and go, and they had a whisper room or some type of isolation booth, a little 3x3,
Nice.
and they had you sit in there with a music stand, and they had this lighting and all this other stuff. But the thing would get so hot so fast. And I'm a warm guy to begin with, so I'm throwing off a lot of body heat.
Yeah,
and so if the session went on longer than 20 minutes, half an hour, I mean, between takes, I'd be cracking the window, and they'd have a fan in there to turn on between takes to cool it off and get some fresh air. But a couple times I walked out of the booth when we were finally done, and my t-shirt was just soaked through with sweat. How delicious is that, walking out and you're just covered in sweat, and it's like, boy, thanks guys, boy, I bet you can't wait to invite me back for the next one, huh? It's just gross, you know.
I'll bring my own sponge next time and just sort of soak up that puddle that's under the chair. Sorry.
I'll bring a change of clothes too. Can I change in there before I step out? Yeah, it was totally gross, but you know, fortunately they liked me and they were cool. So what are you going to do? The things we do for our business, you know?
Yeah, that heat tolerance is a thing. I mean, I feel like I do it pretty well, but there have been times, in late August where I come out of this and it's like, I come out into my, desk area, my office area, and then I go out to the rest of the house and I'm putting on a sweatshirt. I'm going, man, it's really cold out here. My wife looks at me like, are you out of your mind? It's like 96 out here. It's like, I don't even want to know what the temperature was in the booth. But, in many cultures, they pay good money to have a sauna. So
that's true. I just think of all the health benefits of sweating your ass off in there.
True.
Jim, I don't want to take up any more of your time today. So tell us how people get a hold of you for all the different things that you have going on.
Let's see here. There is my basic voiceover services website is jimedgarvoices.com, because Jim Edgar was a former governor of Illinois and owns the basic URL, so I had to add voices to mine. So
that's interesting. How funny.
Yes, every once in a while I would get like this weird email telling me that I had made a really bad decision. At how they connected that to me doing voiceover, I have no idea.
I'm voting you out.
Yes, it was some of them. Yes, wrote them all back very politely. It's like, different Jim Edgar. It's okay. But then my audio consulting site is justaskjimvo.studio.
Okay, good.
That was a domain that they had, and that actually is a place where if somebody wants to send me audio, I review it for no charge, and they has all that stuff. So any kind of audio help stuff, that would be the better site to contact me through.
Yeah.
I hang out on Facebook. I actually started the VO Tech Talk group, which I know you're in.
VO Tech Talk, great Facebook group, great resource for help about a variety of topics.
Yes, and thank you for your comments this morning too. I was reading those.
I try to do what I can. Be a good participant.
Yeah. And then I'm elsewhere on Facebook, but then probably Instagram's probably the next one. I post under Jim Edgar Voices, Just Ask Jim VO, and then if you're a bike geek, under Cyclofiend, which is the other one.
That's great.
Which isn't that I don't do that much there anymore. That was kind of a website I did when I was working in the bike industry.
I see.
But it's sort of the trailing edge of that. So
that's great. Well, thanks so much for coming on here, Jim. It's been fascinating to hear your story and how you got involved and the level of involvement that you are in this crazy business. So, and you're a great resource for not only voiceovers, but the tech help too. For those others of us in the business, you're very generous with your time and your help. So thank you from all of us to you for that. So that's awesome.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
right. Well, Jim, thanks again. And we'll see you around on Facebook.
Okay. Hopefully elsewhere, face-to-face sometime.
I hope so too. Since we're just down the road, we really should make time. Yeah.
Once we can actually meet each other in person again.
Hi, Jim. Thanks again, Jim.
All right. Take care.
Bye.